in the United Kingdom's Principality of Wales, a land of rolling mountains, green valleys, and rustic homes, where about 2.5 million people live peacefully on about 7,000 square miles of land, pursuing the even tenor of their lives, still clinging tenaciously to their native language, manners, and customs. The country is made up largely of small farms operated by independent farmers who usually live in humble stone cottages strung picturesquely throughout the heathered hills and valleys. About 8% of the people speak the Welsh language exclusively. 32% are bilingual, and the remainder speak English only. People may differ in language, but chickens are the same the world over. And in lands where a traveler may not be able to speak to his fellow men because of language barriers, the good old-fashioned cluck of a chicken sounds a universal note. On the seaboard coast of Wales stands one of the most historic old shrines in the British Isles, Caernarfon Castle, completed in the early part of the 13th century. The first Prince of Wales was born here over 600 years ago, and he later became King Edward II, in whose reign several magnificent castles were built to overawe the turbulent Welsh people. Perhaps the best known of these old shrines is Conwy Castle, situated on the estuary of the Conwy River. The original castle, which stood on this site, was built by Edward I, who was besieged here in 1290 and would have been starved into submission if it had not been for the timely arrival of a ship. Aside from history, we were particularly interested in the railroad tunnel and tracks built along the rear walls of this ancient fortress in such a manner as to blend with the setting, just as this comparatively modern bridge has been built in front of the castle. A praiseworthy tribute of the present to the past, and a fine example of how the new and the old can be harmonized without disturbing the sacred sentiments of tradition. Conwy Bay provides excellent boating facilities for those who would cruise on waters that are noted for good fishing in a peaceful environment endowed with folklore and tradition. We are now in the region known as the Menai Straits, a channel about 14 miles long and a mile wide, which is crossed by the longest suspension bridge in the British Isles. This architectural masterpiece, known as the Menai Bridge, was completed in 1826. It is 580 feet long from pier to pier and about 1,700 feet overall. The total circuit of Wales is about 500 miles, and most of this consists of coastline, providing ideal settings for many seaside resorts, the largest of which is Llandudno, facing the Irish Sea. While wandering over the sands of this beach with a little girl named Alice Liddell, it is said that the author, Lewis Carroll, was inspired to write his famous story of Alice in Wonderland. Leaving the balmy breezes of the sea, we journey inland to the quaint little mountain resort of Betws-y-Coed, noted for its picturesque settings, reminding us somewhat of Switzerland. Almost the whole surface of Wales is mountainous or undulating, but there are a few places of interest that cannot be reached by motor cars over good roads that pass through the most picturesque scenery in the Principality. The motor trip from Betws-y-Coed to Llanberis is unusually interesting, as it affords an ever-changing panorama of mountain and pastoral settings. Although the chief mineral product of Wales is coal, the slate quarries in the northwestern section are of great economic importance, as they produce the very finest quality of slate and provide employment for many thousands of workmen. On the north shore of beautiful Llanberis Lake, we pass the mammoth Dinnorwick slate quarries, rising terrace above terrace to the height of nearly 2,000 feet. The slate quarried here is used principally for roofing, tabletops, switchboards, blackboards, and stair treads, the more massive pieces being made into sinks and tubs. Even children in distant India carry to school slates that were quarried here. Mount Snowdon, forming a lofty backdrop to this lake, is the highest mountain in Wales, and it provides for hikers or mountain climbers one of the world's best ridge expeditions. Like most visitors here, however, we prefer to do our climbing by way of this unique little railway car, which makes the trip to the summit, a distance of 5 miles, in exactly 1 hour. The Swiss system of mountain railways is considered the most efficient yet invented, and it has been adapted on this line. The rails are firmly jointed and fastened down to prevent any slipping or breaking. The road is also anchored at intervals into massive concrete blocks to overcome its tendency to slide downhill. The engine works very smoothly and can be brought to a dead stop within the space of a few feet. Nevertheless, the sheep which we encounter along the way are somewhat of a menace, and our route at times takes us so close to the edge of the mountain that the safest railway in the world is not completely devoid of hair-raising thrills. Although the train in which we are riding passes over this route several times a day, the poor sheep never seem to learn the danger that lurks between the rails. Over the fence they go to quiet their palpitating hearts, while we ascend higher and higher toward the summit. En route, we pass a few stout-limbed mountain climbers who may have been at it for several hours. And now, from out the mountain mists, we behold the peak of Snowdon. Prior to the advent of the railway, only small groups of mountain climbers approached the abode of the Eagles, as Snowdon was once called. But today, thousands of tourists from all parts of the world regard the trip as one of the musts of world travel. After having a cup of hot tea in the Summit House, it is customary for visitors to explore the peak of Snowdon and enjoy the rugged scenery below. But now the shadows of twilight are beginning to fall over the mountains and in the valleys of Wales. And by way of conclusion, we can think of nothing more appropriate than a familiar Welsh lullaby, All Through the Night.